feel like every time I make a video, I'm in a different part of my house. This is the only room in my house that is quiet right now. My husband is off work today, my daughter is downstairs playing a game with him, and this is the only quiet space. They're very noisy, but it is 84 degrees in here, so hopefully I can get through this without melting. Hi, my name is 𝗵𝗵𝗿𝗲. I am a multi-award winning fantasy author, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about something that I am doing right now that is a little bit new. For me, it's something that I have not done before, and that is I am writing a short story that is going to be part of an anthology. So anthologies are, of course, anytime a bunch of authors get together and you'll have like a collection of short stories or sometimes novellas that are all kind of set around a central theme. And it's something that I've never participated in before. I have my reasons, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit, just as, you know, part of sharing my experience. So anthologies usually start with the theme, and then a call will go out. Sometimes you see them on social media. If you are in groups for authors, a lot of those will have calls for anthology submissions. Twitter used to be a really good place to find anthologies that you could submit to, not so much anymore. But also if you're in a place that has any like local writers groups, it's pretty normal for writers groups to get together, put together anthologies. So some of the different reasons that you might want to join an anthology are, first off, getting publishing credits. It can be easier to write a short story to fit a specific theme instead of writing a book and then hoping that someone likes your theme. It's not to say that it's easier to get your work included in an anthology, because it's just a very different market. But it is somewhere that you can rack up some publishing credits. Some anthologies pay their authors. Sometimes writing something for an anthology can make you eligible for awards that you might not otherwise qualify for. There are always those that have the goal of selling a lot of copies and making some money for the participants. There are a lot of anthologies that are done for different charities. And then, of course, there is the most common one, which is when a bunch of authors of similar subjects get together. And the idea is if everybody writes in the same genre, then you put together an anthology, everybody promotes it to your audience, and it's an opportunity to get your work in front of a lot of new readers very quickly. There are also times that you might join an anthology as an opportunity to explore new techniques or new styles, but there is a time and place for that, and if you're trying to pursue new readers for your existing work, it's not the best place to try it out. That's probably the biggest reason that I haven't done anthologies before. I've been invited to quite a few, but they never really fit what I write. And if I'm going to be taking the time to sit down and write and polish a short story, I want it to really be representative of my work, unless it's an opportunity for me to try something new. So some of the most recent anthologies that I was invited to participate in were for like cozy mysteries. I don't write those, so getting in front of a bunch of readers of cozy mysteries isn't going to help me any. It's not going to advance my career because it's not going to show me anybody who reads the kind of stuff that I typically write. Another one was for urban fantasy, and that's kind of the same thing. I don't write urban fantasy, I write epic fantasy and romantic epic fantasy, and I guess fairy tale retellings now too, but the things that I write are all kind of in one small part of the Venn diagram, and then urban fantasy is over here, and you just have this really slim overlap that both of them are fantasy. So I didn't feel like there was going to be a lot of conversion of like the high action gunshots and monsters type urban fantasy wasn't really going to convert to readers to romantic epic fantasy. So it wasn't really a good fit for me. And also at the time that I was invited to those, I had other things going on and I couldn't really spare the time. The amount of time that it takes me to complete a short story is probably greater than the amount of time it takes me to write one chapter of a book. And I feel like I should always prioritize working on my own books unless it's for something that's going to propel me forward in a way that my own work wouldn't on its own. But then the local writers group that I've been attending hit me up and they wanted me to include a story in their latest anthology. It's not a requirement for members to participate, but I felt like it was going to be a good opportunity for me to practice something that I do want to use in a future book, and it's not something that I've done before. So even though I would be writing in a genre that I don't typically, I'm just writing, something contemporary, a contemporary short story based on local landmarks. But it was going to give me an opportunity to do something and really polish something that wasn't within the scope of what I typically do in a way that advances my own work. In this particular instance, I am talking about writing in first-person POV. If I'm being entirely honest, I hate first person. I don't read stories that are in first person. I don't enjoy it. There's always been a really big disconnect for me that I cannot relate to stories that are told in first person. However, there are also certain concessions that you have to make as an author when you want to be successful. And one of the trends that I have noticed strongly emerging in romantic fantasy is that the majority of what is successful now is written in first-person POV. So when I sit down and I think, what can I do to make my work more marketable? That's something that has been on the table for me. Like, maybe I should consider writing something in first person, even though it's not something I like, even though it's not something I read. I feel like that is at least one concession that I could make that wouldn't be too hard to adapt to, but I need practice writing in first person. Since I've never done it, it's not something that I have any experience with. So in that respect, this anthology was a perfect opportunity. It's not the kind of anthology that my readers would typically be looking for, so I don't think there's going to be any carryover conversion from my readers to readers of this anthology. There might be, you never know. But because the readers are going to be people who aren't familiar with my work, they're not going in with a preconceived notion of what my stories are going to be like. It's not something that I'll be able to use for career advancement, but it is a really great opportunity for practice. The main differences between what I typically write in this story are going to be, the setting, obviously, but I'm hoping that some of my authorial voice will still come through. I've gotten some feedback from a couple of my usual beta readers just because I know I can trust them to really be harsh with me. And, if it's not the type of genre that they typically read, what I'm really looking for right now is feedback on craft. And even though it's not something where they're familiar with the genre conventions, they can look at the raw craftsmanship and tell me if I am on the right track. And there are a few things that they came back on. They're like, I like this, you did this very well, but there are a few places where my message did not come through as clearly as I wanted. I felt like it was pretty transparent, but apparently it needed to be just plainly stated rather than hinted at. And I guess one advantage of working in a first-person perspective is, if you're inside the character's head that deeply all the time, then you have the opportunity to just plainly say what the character thinks. So for my personal landmark, my story revolves around a visit to the Potter's Field. There is a cemetery here in Memphis that is colloquially known as Babyland because it is primarily children. It's not something to be proud of that Memphis has an infant mortality rate that is similar to an undeveloped third world country. So my story brushes up against the experience of a rideshare driver who has to take an old man out to the cemetery where the old man's child was buried. All of my beta readers told me that it is very sad and they are very upset with me about that. But at the same time, some of the messages that I wanted to have in the story were not as clear as I had hoped, so it still needs a couple more passes of revision. At this point, I have revised the story 3 times before sending it out to my betas. So as far as grammar and spelling and all that, I'm not really worried about it. It's pretty clean. So if I can figure out how to get some of my messages more clearly stated in the story, it should be good to go. The submission deadline is not until the end of July, so I have plenty of time, but I am also helping with the anthology cover, so I need to make sure I leave myself time to work on that. And that's another thing to consider when submitting for anthologies too, because sometimes you will have anthologies that are put together by an editor who will go over your work with a fine-tooth comb and help you improve it before publication. But there are also anthologies that really what they are looking for is work that is already completely polished. And in those cases, the editor is really more of a curator who is selecting already completed, already polished stories to put together into their anthology. And this one is one of the latter. They really want it to already be completely edited and ready to go. They'll do a little bit of editing, but they don't have a lot of time to do a lot. So I really need to make sure that it is as error-free and well-constructed as I can before I submit it. But this is also a little bit different from some other anthology opportunities because since I personally am invited to participate in this one, I already know that I have a place. There are a lot of times where anthologies are something, you know, you just submit to and then you wait to see if you're accepted or not. So I'm a little bit spoiled in that case because I can give them anything that I want as long as it fits their theme guidelines. And as far as style and editing, I have complete control, which of course is, you know, something that I prefer. Being indie, I like having a hands-on approach with everything that I do. Obviously, I'm open to correction because I'm going to be making changes based on the beta feedback that I got because what I really wanted didn't come through the way that I was hoping, but we'll see how it comes together in the end. Other than that, I am just getting things ready for the launch of my new book, The Witch and the Worm, which comes out on June 29th, so that is right around the corner. I'm really excited about it, and I will eventually put together a video about how the launch went, things that I did for it and things that I would do differently, but I want to give the book some time to mature organically and really give it an opportunity to see how the things that I did are working or not working before I make any judgment calls, because like right now, I can't tell you how well the launch has gone because it hasn't even launched yet. I will say though that the hardcover edition that I got put together is beautiful and I cannot wait for people to start seeing that. But yeah, that is all for this time. I am going to go get back to writing and I am melting, so I'm going back downstairs to where we have air conditioning. Take care and I'll see you next time.